Hey, what is good, y'all? It's your girl, Gracesandra, back for another episode of the Out Here Trying to Survive podcast, where I talk about all things surviving, honey. Whatever you need to do to survive, that's what we're gonna do. So, one of the things I want to talk to you guys about today is surviving toxic relationships. It's something that I just recently did. I recently cut off someone because I believed that the relationship had become toxic and I was no longer interested in being part of it anymore at all. It was kind of a last straw kind of situation. So I want to talk about that. But I also polled you guys on Instagram and Facebook and asked you guys for stories and ideas and things that you thought about toxic relationships, experiences that you've been through, any advice that you had. So I want to read a couple of them because I think it's actually really interesting and really helpful. So my friend Eric said, here's why I have dropped people. So what we're going to talk about in particular is walking away from toxic situations, which I'll admit, this is something that I have struggled with, especially in particular as an abuse survivor, as an early childhood abuse survivor. When you grow up being violated, you tend to not have good boundaries with yourself because you grow up with someone violating your boundaries, so you don't learn your voice. And I admit this has been a really hard issue for me over the years with men in particular. I have really struggled to find my voice and really say, like, no. This is what I do or don't want, or no, this situation is toxic. But for some reason with women, I've always been pretty straightforward that I don't want any toxicity from women, or if a woman is presenting as toxic, it's a lot easier for me to get rid of her than it is for me to create those boundaries and to draw that line of delineation than it is with men. So it's just an interesting thing. And sometimes it has to do with our mama issues and our daddy issues. So we're going to talk a little bit about that, but just curious as you're listening to think about what are some issues you've had. Has it been both? Because I have a couple friends who've said to me, the way that you create boundaries and that you can cut off a toxic woman in your life, like I need that when it comes to men. And I've said that too. And then I've had other people in my life who've been like, the way that I do it with men, you need to be able to do that with men. And then I've had friends who've said the exact opposite. So it's just interesting. But here's one of the things my friend Eric said, which I thought was helpful. So he listed out why he's dropped people. 1, if I'm the one that reaches out every time, it's time for us to stay in touch. 2, if they don't want to grow or they're trying to stop me from growing. 3, if they post or say anything about being okay with abusing women. 4, if they post regularly about being a Trump supporter, a quote unquote real American, or about how much they love guns. If they are overly religious and proselytizing. If I decide they don't deserve to benefit from my journey anymore. If I decide that I don't want to know about their journey anymore. If they are overly negative and pessimistic about everything, if I discover that they are spying on me and tattling to other toxics, if they seem unsure about staying in touch or treat me like garbage, if they can't apologize or take accountability for their actions. I was like, Eric, thank you so much for sending me these. You might relate with some of those, but sometimes, and I'm talking about every single situation. I'm not talking about just romantic relationships. I'm not talking about just some of your good friends. I'm talking about your cousins who may be toxic, your parents, in some cases, even our children, although most of us I think are not old enough to have our children become completely toxic yet, hopefully. But I'm talking about anybody in your life who is representing a toxic person. That could just be people you've met online and you only know online, like some of the things that he said, like they're over religious or they're proselytizing too much. He didn't say this, but I'm assuming he means from his Facebook or whatever. So here are some other things before we go into this that I wanted to read. So my friend Eric, who sent me that list privately, also sent me this. He lost a friend of 20 years. Not that the person died, but they had to cut it off. He said, I felt like he died. So he wrote this poem and put it on his Facebook page that he shared with permission. It's called Death of a Brother. I lost a brother today. Through no fault of my own. He didn't tell me he was sick and held his pain for months. Communication works both ways. Your words unleash the help. Push the nurse call button and open your door. Everything was awesome, not an emergency, you said, then turned to slap my hand as a reach for yours. I don't do maybes. I don't do unsures or I'll think about it when there's plenty of people who want my hands. I pity you because you lost me. My energy is healing. I would have stayed on call forever, but now you are dead. I was like, damn, Eric. But I get where he's coming from, especially when you have to end those long-term connections. It can be so painful and it can feel like a death. So the way that I worded this on my Facebook and Instagram was, I'm recording an episode on my podcast about the importance of cutting off toxic people and relationships as a radical act of self-care. What thoughts, ideas, or experiences do you have? I will credit you and shout you out, of course. My friend Ken wrote, self-care is difficult because it is not a gift. It's work. It's disruptive. It's unrelenting. It's complicated. Being removed from toxicity is only as good as your ability to mistake the growing pains of peace with failure, nor mistaking tranquility for peace. Also, so good. One of my best friends in the world, Keita, wrote, like Nike, just do it. Your brain and your body will thank you later. Signed, a psychotherapist. P.S. I hope you talk about how difficult this is to do in practice. It is difficult. And again, this has not been easy for me in any way. And I'm going to tell y'all some stories about this. My friend Christy, brilliant PhD friend Christy, wrote, boundaries might feel wrong when you're not used to enforcing them, but it doesn't mean they are wrong to enforce, which I also completely and totally agree with. Let me see if anybody commented about this on Instagram. So I recently said goodbye to a friend, and it's really weird because I don't usually actually cut people off real abruptly and block them. But I was kind of at the end of my rope. There has been several times, probably 3 times at least already, where this person has apologized to me after I've said this kind of behavior is harmful to me or hurts me. And this was the 4th time. And I'm not sure if she apologized because she left me some messages and I didn't listen to them because I was literally at the end of my rope. But there has been so many little microaggressions over the course of the last year that I have ignored or tried to explain away. But basically what I felt like why it was becoming so toxic was because I felt like this person spoke to me so disrespectfully pretty much anytime we got into a conversation about my life. And she let me know it's because I care about you. So I don't want to see you hurt. I don't want to see you making any bad choices. I get that. But I have other girlfriends in my life who love me just as much, if not more, have known me more and were closer, and don't hurt my feelings when they're trying to help me make better decisions or not do something I regret. So I found myself feeling like I'm constantly on edge, constantly defending myself, constantly being like, what can I say or what can I not say? There's also this other dynamic that was going on that is actually a verbally abusive behavior when done over and over and over again. It's called countering. And it's something that happens when you're talking to someone and they always bring up the opposite viewpoint. No matter what you say, they always have the opposite viewpoint. So my ex-husband, who was narcissistically abusive, used to do this to me. It can produce a really big trauma response in someone because you're scared to say anything because you know they're going to disagree with you and you just don't want to deal with it. So this happened with her all the time. It seemed like it didn't matter what I said. She always disagreed. And I was like, this is literally driving me crazy. I didn't think about the countering aspect until after the relationship was over. And I think I saw a TikTok or something and I was like, oh yeah, that's part of what was making me feel jittery and undone. And then I also saw on Instagram one day, you know, these random things you be sharing. So from the holistic psychologist, it was a little, Instagram carousel about how good it feels when you don't have to try to explain yourself to someone. And I found that was the dynamic that I had with her. We were trying to become better friends, but I felt like I always had to explain myself no matter what it was about, no matter if it was I wanted a cookie or I want to go on a date. It felt like a very unhealthy dynamic in that way. And that was really, really, really bothering me for quite a while. And there was a couple times where I just very gently said, like, these interactions are really overwhelming to me. It's really overwhelming. I find it very inappropriate. I find it intrusive. And then she would say, I'm sorry. If I'm not helping, then let me know. And I felt like I was kind of saying that without having that awkward conversation of like, it's not helping. I also found that our worldviews were really clashing. And sometimes in some situations, you can have someone where your worldview clashes and it doesn't matter. It's not a toxic thing. It's not necessarily a bad thing. You just see things differently, and each of us needs to figure out what we can tolerate in these relationships. But some of the ways that our worldview was clashing was just like, it always ended up making me feel bad for stuff that I didn't want to feel bad about. Didn't need to feel bad about because it was neutral. I found myself in this constant argument pattern with her. We were literally constantly arguing. Anytime anything about my life came up, we were arguing, and it didn't feel like, I'm not asking you for permission. I don't need to have an argument every time. And meanwhile, I have 2 or 3 other girlfriends who I have these same conversations with, who know what I'm doing, who I'm dating, what's going on in my life. I've had a really rough year with mental health, who I can have these conversations with, and we don't need to argue about it. But I found that one of the things that I really don't like in relationships in general is people who don't have a curiosity about me and my life and why I think the way I do. And if that doesn't lead them to know me better or love me better, then it can be a problem, because having a curiosity about someone's life and allowing that curiosity to form how you treat them and how you engage with them is a really beautiful thing. So for example, I had a long talk with my girl Ani about me starting to date this guy a little while ago who was 28. And me and Ani had a great conversation about it. And we talked about, the pros and cons, because I am 46. Okay. Your girl was out here cougaring. And Ani and I had a great conversation about it, and kind of like, how low is too low and stuff like that. And some of the perks of dating men who are younger, especially if you're in a phase of life where you're not really looking for anything serious, or where you're just looking to have more of like a fun time. But in this conversation with her, it ended up being an argument. Again, she said something offensive again. And I'm like, why is this necessary? Why do every time I talk to you, you have to say something offensive that shows zero curiosity and zero flexibility in terms of how you move with it? So there were several things. The worldview thing, I think, was a really big deal to me too, because sometimes, when you realize you have a worldview difference with people, it starts off like, oh, like you see it this way and I see it this way. But the more you get into it, the more it just becomes a chasm. And she follows someone who I legitimately don't like at all and don't respect at all. She's a very popular teacher right now. And I'm not going to say her name because I really don't want the drama, but she's a very popular teacher right now who teaches about essentially like how to use men for money. So this teacher essentially believes that men who don't have money are trash. And that really offends the part of me that believes that all of humanity in some way deserves mercy, even men. I really don't like her teachings. I've listened to enough of it. It's just not the way I see the world at all. I think it is not a great response to the ways that men have mistreated women. I think there's a lot of other ways we can go about getting what we need in the world. And the last thing I want to do literally in life is spend time with men I don't like, enjoy, or am attracted to physically, emotionally, sexually, spiritually, just so that I can get money out of them or dates out of them or free dinner out of them. And I'm legitimately not judging the women who do this. I just don't want that for my life. It comes from so many different subterranean level beliefs that it's actually pretty offensive to me. And so she was sharing more and more and more of that teacher. And I was just like, I don't want to see this at all. I don't want to see this. I don't want to know about it. And that's kind of like what her life is revolving around right now, is finding that dynamic. And I don't want to. But not only that, like, the whole process of it offends me, but not only that, it doesn't inspire me. And so that's another thing it's a neutral thing. Like, do you want to be around people who inspire you? That's neutral. I'm not calling her toxic or anything like that, because that kind of behavior doesn't inspire me. But it is true that every one of us is kind of a big conglomeration of the 5 people we spend the most time with. I realized the more I was getting closer and closer to her, the more I'm thinking about this stuff. Not only does it not inspire me, it drains me. So it's not like it was toxic. It was just like, I don't want to be around that. Like, I really want the women in my life, and all of my really good friends are like this. Like, they inspire me. They inspire me, like, to be a better person and to think bigger, to dream big, to go after our dreams, to be great mothers and partners or friends or daughters. I'm constantly, like, my really, really close friends, I'm just constantly like, y'all inspire me, and that's kind of what I feel like in dating too. I'm at this place now. Things have changed a lot, but I'm in this place now where I really only want to date people in any way, shape, or form who inspire me. I want to feel like they get me and I get them. And that's not too much to ask. So if somebody is spending a lot of time and energy just trying to figure out how to get money from men, and I think that that's maybe one of the worst strategies in 2023, but there's so many other ways to get money. I just felt like, I don't want to hear it. I don't want to be around it. It's not my thing. This person, she was and is an amazing mother, an amazing survivor. And that did inspire me. But not enough to overcome the ways that I felt constantly disrespected, that I felt constantly kind of a little bit like emotionally beat up on for just me being me. And then there's other ways too, which I won't get into, where I felt like she was using some of the stories and the personal things that have happened to me in ways that weren't actually accurate. And that really bothered me. So there was just so many things. And I found myself talking to my other friends and my therapist about it and being like, she did this. She said this and this hurt me. She did this. She did. And so many people in my life were like, why are you still friends with her? And I'm like, I don't know. I feel like, she's a good person. I should give her another chance. So, I kept being like, okay, I'm going to give her another chance. And then I decided, you know what? I think the best way to go about this is just not talk about my personal life. And I was already feeling like that. Like, it's just for some reason super stressful because she didn't agree with some of the things that I'm doing, which, are not, it was the choice of men, not like actual decisions. But especially the age thing, like that was a real big barrier. But the thing is, y'all, is I didn't agree with some of her choices. I don't agree with a lot of them. The ways that she's going about things are not things that I think are great. But I never had a conversation with her that said, I just fundamentally disagree. I don't think you should do this. This is gross, or this is bad, or this is whatever. I just was like, do you? You do you, boo-boo. Never made her feel like she got to explain herself to me or whatever. Anyway, I'm just trying to give you examples of like how sometimes little things can add up, even in friendships with women who you enjoy, who you're close to. We've gone out a few times and got drinks. And sometimes those things can add up and make you feel like this is literally draining me in a way I cannot do anymore. I just can't handle it anymore. And I wish that it wouldn't have had to end the way it did, because it was extremely abrupt. But here's the thing, and I want to emphasize this. We don't owe anybody anything. We don't owe anybody an explanation when we walk away. And the thing is, this person, she will block people at the drop of a hat. She continuously bragged about how she could drop a man at the drop of a hat if he did something she didn't like, and always told me like, block him, block this dude, block this nigga. Da, da, da. And I was always like, yeah, I'm not really about the block life, because I feel like it's just not who I am. I've never been a big blocker. I will block if it gets to a point where I'm like, oh my gosh, like this is no longer tenable in any way whatsoever. But other than that, I'm not really a blocker. But she was always like, you don't owe anybody anything. These people, they treat you like this. You don't owe them an explanation. And she kept going on and on about blocking. There was a guy I dated in, I think like the end of March and like the first couple weeks of June. So we ended up going on 4 dates and it didn't work out. And we just decided to be friends. And it was cordial, completely cordial. Like, yeah, we're just not a good match. We're just going to be friends. And she was like, you need to block him. And I'm like, why? And she was like, why keep him around? And I was like, we decided to be friends. And I was like, I don't mind staying friends on like we stayed friends on Facebook and Instagram. And then after that, like he has a daughter my age. We got together with our daughters and went to the beach and had a nice time. Just completely as friends, completely friends. And so I told her about that and she was like, I think you need to block him. Well, anyway, so I did something I never usually do in this situation, because we were talking. I had just had a conversation. So again, it was about me. It was about something I'm going through. And so I was talking to another friend, 2 different friends, about this situation where I was going to talk to someone, visit someone who is younger than me. And we had, conversations about it. And then I talked to this person and then she just completely goes off on me about it. And I felt like it was literally like the straw that broke the camel's back. Like, that's it. That's it. I cannot take this anymore. Like, it's been 9 months of me holding my tongue about this silly ass, stupid ass shit that you keep saying to me that makes me feel like I'm a shitty person when actually I'm a really good person who's trying really hard to love people, be kind to people, be supportive, be a good woman, be a good mom. I just worked way too hard in life to be nice and respectful to people. And I've tried to continuously give her respect. And I was like, I'm done. And so I left her a quick little voice message and I was like, I can't do this anymore. Like, you're so judgmental. I can't say anything to you without you coming back to me with some sort of judgment. And what she said, I'm not going to repeat it, but it was really harsh and really judgmental and so unnecessary. And so I saw that she left me some voice clips back, and I was like, I don't want to do the labor. I don't even want to listen. I don't want to do the emotional labor. I don't want to hear another apology. I don't want to hear shit. So I just blocked her, and I blocked her on everything. And one of my good friends, Kita, was like, kind of just asking me questions about like what made me decide to block, since I'm not someone who usually blocks toxic people or toxic situations, which I feel like this situation had elements of competition. It had elements. There's so many things I'm not even telling y'all that were really, really bothering me for months. And so my friend Kita asked me like, what made you decide to block? And I said, you live by the sword, you die by the sword. This is her method. This is the way that she goes about. When she don't like somebody, they sneeze in the wrong direction, she blocks them. She said to me so many times before, if he ain't treating you well, if he disrespecting you, block him. And I'm like, this is how you are treating me. If I were to tell her that if I were to just pretend like a man had said the things to me that she said to me over the last 6 to 9 months, if I were to do that, she'd have been like, block him. What are you doing? Block him. He's terrible. He's mean. So I blocked because that's the way that she deals with things. And I was like, I'm not doing it. I'm not doing the emotional labor. In hindsight, I wish I had maybe left one voice message and said like, hey, there's several different things going on why I want to end this relationship. It's not just because of this last thing you said, but this has become toxic. This dynamic has become toxic, and I can no longer be in it to protect my heart and my mind. And when I tell you that it's only been, I think, a week or two, I have felt so much better and so much freedom from just not having to explain myself and my choices to someone who don't pay my bills. It is amazing how empowering it can feel to do this, because let me tell y'all, I had been considering cutting her off as a friend since December was the first time that I told my therapist, like, I can't do this anymore. Like, this person is hurting me. And my therapist was like, I think you should cut her off. And I again in January, again in February, Kita's one of my best friends, talked to my therapist, and they were like, yeah, you need to end this friendship. So many people in my life were like, you need to end this friendship. This is not healthy in any way. I'm telling y'all that to say, like, sometimes it does take a long time to realize what you're going through, to realize what's happening to you. Because the thing is just, if you're anything like me, you always want to have the benefit of the doubt for people. I don't know why that's how I grew up. I just grew up like slightly, not even slightly, I'm pretty empathetic, but also just by personality, always wanting to give people the benefit of the doubt. I think especially with women, in honesty, because I grew up with some really great friendships. I had a couple of best friends by the time I was in 6th grade, and then a couple more in high school, and then a couple more in college. And I've just continued to kind of rack up really lovely, healthy female connections. And I really haven't had very many toxic women in my life. And my friend Jean, who's like one of my best friends in the world, at some point in college, we started talking about this, and she was like, yeah, I noticed that like really toxic, needy women tend to flock to me, but they don't to you. And I was like, yeah, I give them that like stay back vibes, because for some reason, I just don't have the tolerance level for it. And I feel like I've kind of always given that off, right? So in that way, I've enjoyed these really beautiful, healthy female friendships. I haven't had to do this. It took me off guard that I was like, there's someone in my life who I'm getting closer to that talks down to me all the time, speaks to me disrespectfully, is kind of mean to me, is pretty judgmental, doesn't actually really listen, constantly apologizes but does the same thing, counters everything I say, always has to argue with me. I was like, how did I let this person in? And it was just really like jarring, because then I also felt afraid to end it, because I felt like, how do you end a friendship with a girlfriend, which is just really different. I feel like it's a very different feeling than ending a situation with a guy who you've, let's just say, loved, or ending a toxic relationship with a romantic partner, whoever it is. It feels very different. And I've also ended relationships with toxic family members, or very severely distanced myself from toxic family member situations. Actually, I'm in that situation with one of my family members right now, who I won't say, but even when you know you're protecting yourself, it can be incredibly difficult to do this. I want to acknowledge that with anyone. There was a time, this is a brief little caveat, but in earlier this year who I was talking to someone, a guy who I was talking to and really liked, but felt like this situation has elements of toxicity after 3 weeks, which is just insane. Like that's a very fast progression from, oh, I like him, he's cute, to this feels very toxic and I need to end this. And when I ended it, I sent him a message and he wrote back and said, okay, that's fine. Thanks for letting me know. And then I blocked him in part because of the advice from my friend. And I immediately regretted it because I felt like it was unnecessary, like that level of blocking. Sometimes you might actually even feel regret. Now, in this situation, I don't feel any regret at all. I just feel relieved. Like I said, I was at the end of my rope. But there was a situation in January-ish where I was dating someone, and after 3 or 4 weeks, I knew it was going to work. I knew it was not going to work, and there was some elements of him that felt very toxic. And I was like, I cannot let this go further. I don't even want to get in deeper because Lord knows what might happen. So I cut him off. I blocked him at the advice of my friend, by the way, but also in part because I wanted to protect myself for if he reached back out to me and was like, hey, I'm so sorry, can we try this again? And I knew I'd be weak enough to maybe try it again. But I felt so bad about it. I felt really bad. I mean, it was like for 3 or 4 days where I felt so down. And it was because I literally created a boundary to protect myself from getting more emotionally involved with a man who I could clearly see red flags for. So sometimes you'll have the feeling of like, this is really sad. I've just made a choice to love and care for myself. And it ended up hurting in the interim, because now, of course, I'm so glad that I'm not connected to him. And he has continued to confirm his toxicity just from things I've heard about him, things he said. I've seen a few things on Facebook. Like, it's confirmed. I was right. I saw the red flags. I saw the toxicity. So on the one hand, in the beginning, though, it hurt. And then in this instance, I just feel really relieved. But another wonderful thing that happened, y'all, when you decide that you no longer want to be engaged in a toxic relationship or with a toxic person or family member or whatever, something that can happen as a result is you feel empowered, because there was a few situations that were lingering in my life with other people who I just needed to cut off. I'll just be honest with you. One of them was, a guy who I dated last fall, and we liked each other and we just text every once in a while. And I was like, this is draining me of energy and I need to cut him off. But I was very hesitant. And another situation kind of like that, where sometimes there's just guys, they just, they flirt every now and then and it feels like it's harmless. But the thing is, y'all, it's not harmless. It's not harmless. And I could go on stories for days about that because I don't want to give all my business, but there are just some things that happened today where I was like, these little interactions, they seem innocuous. They seem like they're harmless, but they take up time and energy and it's not useful. I do not have infinite energy. So when you start the process of realizing that you have to protect yourself from all of these things out here in these streets, you feel empowered once you start. And so after I blocked her, which again had been a decision I had been thinking about making for, at this point, 6 months. Then I was like, you know what? Let me actually block that ninja, that one that I just told y'all about. And then I was like, you know what? This other one who's just randomly flirting and just wasting my time, let me block him too. Well, I won't go into more of it, but my point is I felt empowered to make decisions that I needed to do for myself. And I have had this sense of sometimes when your intuition is telling you to do something, you need to do it. And I've had this sense sometimes I get just words and phrases in my mind that I know I need to follow. It could be, call it my intuition, call it my gut instinct. You can call it the Holy Spirit speaking to me, God endowing wisdom. But I just have had this sense like, make room. That's the sentence that's kind of been going in my head, like, make room. And I've been really in this mode lately of really trying to manifest better in my life. I'm really trying to heal. I'm really trying to, like I said, cut off toxic relationships and toxic people. I'm really trying to make room for the changes in my life that I want to see, that I've been asking God for, that I've been trying to manifest. I'm trying to level up so many areas of my life after having a really rough year last year. I had a really, really rough year and a horrible mental health year. year, I feel like starting to kind of come alive again and realize that some of these situations that I've allowed myself to be in, including with this friend and some of these guys that I have realized that don't deserve me. And I'm not saying that from like a I'm so much better than thou, kind of thing. Just sometimes when you are operating beneath a standard that you have for yourself. And I know that in some of the pain and agony and mental health drama of this past year, particularly after losing my mom, that I did make some choices that I do regret, although I tend not to live in regret, but I'll just say that weren't the wisest. And I understand that is behind me now. And I have so much self-compassion for myself. I live for self-compassion. You have to have self-compassion for yourself if you've made mistakes. But y'all, making one decision to really almost catastrophically destroy a friendship because that's how much I felt like it was hurting me started a domino effect that just has, and it's only been a couple weeks, that has really created a beautiful growth in me that I feel like this is what I need. This is the empowering I need to make room for what God has for me. And I just love that for me. I love that for me. And I love that for you if that's something you do already do. So the thing is I have friends in my life who already do this pretty well. Unless everybody is just out here lying. It seems like more people do this really well than people like me who notoriously struggled to create boundaries for myself, to both articulate those boundaries, speak exactly what I'm trying to say to people in interpersonal relationships. Because I'm fine saying exactly what I want to say on here. It's just me in this room right now by myself. But in interpersonal relationships, I have struggled, particularly with men, to say exactly what the hell is on my mind and to lay down these boundaries. And I have, like a lot of other women growing up in a westernized world, been very much socialized to cater to the needs of men and very much socialized to make men happy and keep men happy, not only because they will hurt us if we don't as one outcome, but also because that's just what we're supposed to do. We're a helpmate. We're from the rib. We're supposed to help. We're supposed to make them feel better. We're supposed to coddle. We're supposed to mother. We're supposed to parent, even when we married to them. So there's all of this socialization that I just soaked up like a sponge that I've almost had to, not even almost, I have had to deliberately say to myself, why are you doing that? Why are you centering this person's feelings over your safety? Why are you centering this person's potential wounding or being offended over your own wellness? Why are you centering this man at all? Honey, why? Why? It's been a journey, y'all. It's been a journey. For those of you who understand that journey, I think you get me. So one of my good friends from the last few years, I was telling her about a situation with someone who I was having a really hard time cutting off. Now, let me also say, as a narcissistic abuse survivor, I've also had very real struggles with trauma bonds. If you know anything about trauma bonds, not when you bond with someone because you're both traumatized. That's not what trauma bonds are. Trauma bonds are when there is a power dynamic with an abuser and a victim, and the victim is literally physically addicted to in an internal brain and body peptide addiction to the abuse or to the abuser. And it forms a very, very powerful bond that keeps victims in abusive situations. Once your body has experienced a dysregulated nervous system and you have been trauma bonded, it's very easy to become trauma bonded again. When I tell you I was severely trauma bonded to my ex, I mean that in the literal sense of the word. I was severely trauma bonded. So I have had to be very careful to not get into situations again. But I can tell there's been a few times where I can tell that my body has been activated into like trauma bonded thinking, and it feels in my body the way it felt when I felt very trauma bonded to my ex. So I was telling my girl Cindy, there was someone, it was just time to let go. Someone who I was dating or something. This was, I think, a year and a half ago, and it was time to let go. And I was telling her how hard it was to let go. And she said, you know what I think a lot of people don't understand is, especially particularly for childhood victims of pretty severe abuse and trauma, that especially if that abuser is a parent, it is very, very easy for the child to conjoin love and abuse, like literally, like it goes like this. And without love, there's no abuse. Without abuse, there's no love, that kind of thing. And so she was like explaining to me how for her, when she loses a connection, it feels like death. And I was like, girl, yes, that's how it feels to me too, particularly with men, because my father was my abuser in childhood. He abused me very severely sexually. I loved hearing that from her because I felt so validated. Like, oh girl, thank you so much for just validating that it's not because I'm a bad person, because I have terrible willpower, because I don't have a sense of boundaries, or I'm not wise, or I don't love myself, but that it's a struggle. And this episode is more for those of you who struggle to make these decisions than those of you who are like, oh yeah, I got this in the bag. And that was also something about the situation with my friend, who I'm no longer friends with, that I really, really, really struggled with, because she constantly talked about how she could cut anyone off at the drop of a hat, but it led to impatience with me not being able to do that. No matter how many times I tried to explain, this is a real challenge for me. This is not an easy thing for me to do. I am not you. And a lot of times in situations like this is kind of a whole other point, but when someone's coming to you because they're struggling with something very deeply, something that is harming them, we're looking for empathy, compassion. And I have that in such a beautiful way with so many women friends in my life and my therapist. And so I just refuse to settle. I refuse to settle for anyone who makes me feel like shit for my very real issues, even though I'm out here actively trying to heal. I'm actively in a healing process. I'm actively doing the work of healing from all of my life's trauma. And so if someone can still look at me and treat me pretty shitty and have no mercy, no grace, no sense of respect in the way they communicate with me, it's not worth it for me. And I really want to challenge those of you who are listening to this who have toxic people in your life, or toxic situations, or even just people in your life who you don't like or don't want to be part of your life, and it's not even necessarily toxic. It could be that it's something as innocuous as you believe the world is flat and they believe it's round, which, by the way, I believe it's round. But let's say y'all disagree on that and you just think, I just don't want any flat earthers in my life. And if that's how you feel and you want to let go of that situation, I'm not saying like throw your hands up on everybody, but I do think if there's enough things going on in a situation where you just feel like I cannot do this, then you should go. You should go. I was having a conversation with another friend of mine, a really good girlfriend of mine, and I don't want to say her name, but she's struggling with this with another friend of hers who there's lots of reasons why she wants to end the relationship, but she feels like it's very difficult to do. And she's trying to give subtle hints and the other woman is not getting it. And that is such a hard place to be. And I've been really like, I'm so sorry going through this because I know how hard it is from both sides. One, as someone who I very much struggle with anxious attachment. And even though I don't have anxious attachment with women, like I said, I have anxious attachment issues with men. And then on the other side of it, I've been someone who's tried to let people go with just these real indirect hints and hope they get it, and they don't. So sometimes we just need to do the big thing, like rip the Band-Aid off. And I know that's so hard to do. None of this is easy. But we are going to practice loving ourselves. And that's really what the point of this episode is that when you decide what your boundary is, it is a radical act of self-care and self-love. This whole thing about boundaries has come up so much lately with this whole thing with Keke Palmer and her baby daddy, Darius. And then also with these leaked texts from Jonah Hill and his ex-girlfriend. I forgot her name. I already spoke to the Keke Darius situation. I have a live on it on my YouTube channel if you want to check it out. Same name, Out Here Trying to Survive. But with Jonah Hill, the nigga done lost his damn mind, because the thing is, apparently Jonah slid in her DMs trying to get to know her and seeing she's a surfer. She already has bathing suit pictures up. Surfing is a male dominated sport. So for him to slide in her DMs, become her whole ass boyfriend, and then demand that she not be in a bathing suit very often, that it be a one piece, that she not be around other male surfers, other completely unreasonable things for someone who is a surfer by trade and a surf instructor. Probably a lot of men take her course because she's a pretty hot cute girl giving surf instructions. So for him to demand is basically cut off her source of income. When he slid in her DMs, it's giving hypocrite. Because what if she returned that energy back to him? What if she said, oh, Jonah, my boundary is that I don't want you to be around any women, any actresses, any female actresses. I don't want you to do any sex scenes or kissing scenes. Actually, I don't want you to be in any scenes with women because that's my boundary. Knowing good and damn well she got with an actor, so what he was calling a boundary was not really a boundary. It was more of like, this is controlling. Don't get with a surfer baby if you don't want to. If you don't want to see your woman in a bathing suit on a beach where men are present. It was also giving very 1960s. Lord. So that whole idea of boundaries came up with that situation. And then with Kiki and Darius, coming from this perspective, this very prehistoric perspective that once a woman stops being a mother, she stops being sexy, which is, I could say so much more about that. But my point is that neither of those are actual boundaries. Those are both egomaniacal men feeling a loss of control and trying to control the women they're with who are beautiful, powerful, wealthy, at least Kiki is, have influence. For them to do that under the guise of boundaries, I don't know if Darius said that, but Jonah Hill said that it was boundaries. That's not what boundaries are. Boundaries are about you and what you can do to control the environment around you. And so what Jonah Hill should have said is, hey, I would like to be your boyfriend, but before we proceed, can you agree to this, this, and this? And if she said yes, well then, hey, have at it. But he didn't, now did he? So when I say boundaries, let's not get it confused with trying to control other people. And let's think about, what do we need? And in that situation, I could have said to my friend who I broke up with, I could have said, this is my boundary. I don't want you to talk to me in a mean way anymore. I don't want you to say disrespectful things to me anymore. I don't want you to counter me constantly anymore. I don't want to argue about who I'm dating or who I'm having sex with or whatever. I don't want to do it anymore. And that's my boundary. And I could have said that. And maybe she would have said, okay, that's fine. We'll never talk about this stuff. I'll never counter you again. You never have to feel like you have to explain yourself to me. I won't be judgmental. I won't be mean. But we also got to be realistic, y'all. And that's where I said, when there's emotional labor that you don't want to do, don't do it. And with my friend that I told you about just a minute ago with her girlfriend that she's trying to give these subtle hints, it was a very similar situation. I said, why don't you tell her why you don't want to be her friend anymore, that she's draining you, that there's ways that she is really, really draining you and it's repelling you from wanting to be her friend. And she was like, Grace, I don't want to do the emotional labor. I would for you or for another friend or someone who was like really in my inner circle. I would do the emotional labor, but I'm not doing it for her. And that's what I felt like in my situation with the girl I just broke up with. I'm like, I'm not doing all this emotional labor with her because I've already said I'm uncomfortable 3 different times and she's already apologized 3 different times. So she knows what she's doing and she's just still doing it. So no, I'm not doing the emotional labor. I hope that she can one day understand how she's coming off, how it's really unhealthy, how it can feel very draining and bad. And I don't think that's her intention, but I'm not doing that emotional labor. I'm just not. I'm not. And I think when we are creating our boundaries, that is one thing we need to think through. That's why I know that Jonah Hill wasn't doing boundaries as much as he was doing control, because if he were doing any sort of boundary work, there would have been some emotional labor as opposed to you do A, B, C, D, E, F, G, and listen to me. Otherwise, I'm breaking up with you. Jonah, what a idiot, man. But anyway, thank you so much for watching on my YouTube channel, Out Here Trying to Survive, or listening. And if you would please go take a few minutes and leave me a review on Apple. It really does help push the podcast out there. I am so appreciative for each and every one of you. You can always reach out to me at grace@outheretryingtosurvive.com if you have any show ideas, if you have anything you'd like to bring up or just kick back to me. Definitely send me a message. Thanks so much for listening, guys. Bye.